The following is a presentation of the Women's Football Alliance.
The 2024 season is here, and so is the road to Canton. Welcome to the Road to Canton. I'm your host, Brian Sweeney, the voice of the Women's Football Alliance Pro Division National Championship game. I'm excited to be back for my 7th season with the Women's Football Alliance and my 4th season as the host on the Road to Canton. With me again for his 3rd season is Alex Westhead. Alex, welcome back.
Well, thanks, Brian. It's good to be back, and I think that when you look at the 2024 campaign for the Women's Football Alliance, there's a lot to look forward to, and all 4 divisions, but this WFA Pro season is the most exciting that we've seen in quite some time.
Definitely couldn't agree with you more. The WFA Pro Division was originally slated to have 14 teams this season, but unfortunately, the Arlington Impact will not have a campaign this year. We hope to see them back in 2025. Also this year, the Detroit Venom have decided to go down to the Division 2. However, moving up to the Division 1 is the New York Wolves. The rest of the league pretty much stays the same over the 2024 season. Alex, any thoughts on these changes to the Pro Division?
Well, my first thought, of course, is we want to welcome the New York Wolves to the top division in the Women's Football Alliance. A great way. Certainly, they had battle-tested in the championship game of their divisional round and in Canton, Ohio, too, against OKC. New York Wolves, they've certainly earned this spot in the top flight of the Women's Football Alliance. Now they get to play with the big dogs, and we'll find out just what the Wolves have in store for them. In terms of Detroit going down, disappointing, of course. They had a great running back, Clarissa Tullis, who did such a great job consistently season by season as an All-American frequently for the Detroit Venom, but the writing was on the wall for Detroit. Last in offense last year, just 20 total points scored, and second worst in defense ahead of just DC for points surrendered per game. I think that Detroit going down to Division 2 will be a good move for them, get their success built back up before jumping back up into the WFA Pro.
The rest of the Pro Division looks like this: Pittsburgh, Alabama, Boston, Tampa, St. Louis, Houston, DC, Minnesota, Cali, Dallas, Nevada, and the Mile High. Alex, I've looked ahead at this season, and there's some must-see games on the schedule. Anything you're looking forward to this year?
Well, I think the big thing that I'm looking for first in order to determine, where does everybody rank in Boston? That is our defining characteristic in terms of how does the WFA season go? How do teams compare to Boston? My exciting matchups, I look at a New York and Boston head-to-head matchup. I think the New York Wolves have been chomping at the bit to be able to play the Boston Renegades and show just how strong they are. And I think we'll have a good sense of, is New York ready for the big time after they play the Boston Renegades? Between that, look out west, where in that conference you have so many close competitors, and the gap between all those teams is narrowed significantly. St. Louis is a defending champion of the western side of the bracket, and I think that when you look at it too, Minnesota's going to come back. They'll be strong. Nevada had a significant number of injuries last year. They will be back in full force this year with some changes at quarterback that we'll talk about later on in another segment. And Mile High and Cali, they're still powerhouses in the WFA in the western side of the bracket, where I think that when you look at this season and you look at the schedule in the WFA, there's too much to look forward to because every week is going to have a significant result head-to-head in the Pro Division.
Well, let's jump in and look at the Week 1 matchups. The New York Wolves host the Detroit Venom. In 2023, the Wolves were a perfect 9-0 and won the Division II National Championship. This year, they moved to the Pro Division and will start the season playing Detroit, a team that was in the Pro Division for the last 2 seasons. However, after going a combined 5-7 over that time period, has moved down to play at the Division II level for 2024. This game kicks off at 5:30 Eastern and is available through a link on the Wolves Facebook page. The Houston Energy hosts the OKC Lady Force of Division II. Last season, the Energy went 5-2, losing to Minnesota in the first round of the playoffs. In 2023, the Lady Force looked unstoppable, going 8-0 and outscoring their opponents 322-46 before being shut out by the Wolves in the conference championship game. Both of these teams want to avenge last season's postseason losses and start 2024 on a winning track. The game kicks off at 6 Central. More info on the Energy Facebook page. The St. Louis Slam will host the Columbus Chaos of Division II. In 2023, the Chaos went 4-3, losing in the first round of the playoffs to the Baltimore Nighthawks. St. Louis went 8-1, with their only loss being in the Pro Division Championship game against the Boston Renegades. The Slam and Chaos met one time in 2023, with the Slam coming out on top 42-0. Kickoff is set for 7 p.m. Central. And in Pro Division head-to-head matchup, the 5-time national champion Boston Renegades look to win their 39th straight game as they travel to play the Tampa Bay Inferno. Last season, Boston was the national champion, and Tampa finished 2-4 with one of those losses at the hand of the Renegades on June 3rd by a score of 69-0. Game is set to kick off at 6 p.m. Eastern. DC, Minnesota, Cali, and Dallas start the season on byes. After this short break, we will look at Week 1's Games of the Week. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In the early game of the week, the Pittsburgh Passion head down to battle the Alabama Fire. Last season, the Passion went 3-3 in the regular season, and Alabama went 6-0. The two teams met only once, and it was in the first round of the playoffs in a close game that Alabama won 8-7 before getting their only loss of the season in the conference championship to Boston. Alex, this game is what both these teams want this early in the season to find out who's going to end up playing Boston later on in the playoffs.
Well, I think it's a good opportunity for both of these teams to look at their roster in terms of what they have moving forward, because the big thing that I look for with both of these teams, for Pittsburgh and for Alabama both, is I look for their depth and I look for their health. Let's start with the depth of both teams. Alabama last year, they thrived on running the football. They had the WFA Pro Division leading rusher in Kelly Smith, who ran for almost 1,000 yards. The next closest running back of any in the WFA Pro Division was 500 yards behind her. And so when Alabama has a piece like that, you lose that in the offseason, well then who does your running game come from? Who does that success, that bread and butter that worked so well for Alabama last year, how does that continue to develop as they move on into this season? Because as we know, Alabama's not a team that passes the ball a lot. Looking last year, Courtney Billingsley passed for 447 yards, which is about average for the WFA Pro Division and for the WFA as a whole. But as we found out before, in the Pro Division, that's not enough. You have to be able to run and pass the ball effectively on both sides. And when you look at what Alabama does, yeah, they got a great defense. They have a great running game, but they need that passing game to be able to work in their favor. We saw it in that championship game against Boston. They didn't have a chance against Boston, as many do, simply because they didn't have that passing game. The defense was able to keep it respectable, but again, you need to have both passing and rushing to be able to make that work. Problem is, you've lost your leading rusher in Kelly Smith. She's not rostered for the Alabama Fire from what I've seen so far this year. They're going to need to find somebody to replace her, because otherwise, that's a significant offensive piece. And if teams are able to game plan around, well, we know that they like to run the football, but now, can they run the football? That's a question for the Alabama Fire. And going up against this Pittsburgh Passion defense, that's going to be the first way for them to be able to tell where is their offense going to be able to be headed. Yes, they won the postseason matchup a year ago, 8-7. But again, that was a question mark of depth. That was a question mark of injuries on the Pittsburgh side. We'll know where Alabama is truly after this week in terms of that head-to-head with Pittsburgh, because I think fans across the WFA look at the eastern side as three teams that are chasing Boston. They're looking at DC, they're looking at Alabama, they're looking at Pittsburgh. Really, whichever team is the healthiest is going to be the one that goes up head-to-head to them in the National Conference playoffs coming up in July. But in terms of what Alabama can do, if they can show that health and they can show that two-dimensional side of their offense, which they missed out on last year, I think that's a good chance for Alabama to make a statement this weekend. Pittsburgh, again, has a lot of question marks for me. Largely, again, due to their health. Let's start at the quarterback position. Alyssa George was a quarterback for Pittsburgh for 2022 and for 2023 until she got injured early on in the season. Then you have 5 quarterbacks for Pittsburgh that all threw a pass in an attempt to figure out who was going to replace Alyssa George at quarterback. They settled on Marcelina Chavez. Chavez is listed as a quarterback this year for Pittsburgh, and Alyssa George, well, the hunted has become the hunter. She's now on the defensive line. And so for Pittsburgh, again, a team that had so much great capability on the offensive and defensive side of the ball back in 2022, but lost it due to injury in 2023. You wonder what's on the table for this team this year. They have a great opportunity, if healthy, to be able to prove once again that they're one of the best teams in the National Conference. Because whoever's throwing the ball, there are too many good receivers on the Pittsburgh Passion to be able to keep their offense out of that. You look at what they had last year in terms of wide receivers and that wide receiving core. Malarkey, Meister, Pitts, Meyer, Haig. These great options for the Pittsburgh Passion that just never had a consistent quarterback throwing to them. And when you think about quarterback to receiver, you want to have that consistent target because that chemistry gets built up over time between quarterback and wide receiver. You need to know how the quarterback throws, what their nonverbal communication are, and how does a receiver run a route to be able to get open and navigate through space. If you don't have that same connection, that same chemistry, it's one thing to do it in practice, but if you're doing that in terms of a gameplay where you have a defense breathing down your throat, you have so much of that game day atmosphere that's going on, it's tough to be able to create consistency on an offensive side of the football, and that's something we really saw Pittsburgh struggle in last season. Take a look at what they had statistically last year for their games. They were able to score their season watermark high points in 41 in the season opener at DC, then 21 against Tampa, and then after that, their highest was 28 against the Detroit Venom team that went down to Division II. This is a team that, again, they need that offensive consistency, and they need one quarterback to stay there their entire season to be able to make sure that they have a chance to contend with the Boston Renegades. We'll talk about it later when Boston's the game of the week, but the gap between Boston and the rest of the league is still so high. But if you want to start chipping away, Pittsburgh needs to figure out what they have. They have a great defense. We know that as well. Hannah Damon, Devin Pierce, Madison Miller, Caitlin Niedermeyer, these great names from the Pittsburgh Passion a year ago that contribute to their ability to succeed and pressure a quarterback. In a low-scoring affair in Alabama last year, I expect another low-scoring game this year, simply because both teams are figuring out what are their new identities with changes on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, especially for Alabama figuring out how do we create offense, and for Pittsburgh, what do we have on offense to be able to figure out who picks up this key Week 1 victory.
Do you think Alabama has it in them to go undefeated during the regular season again this year?
Well, I think the Alabama Fire have the advantage this year of having a more difficult schedule. You look at who Alabama played a season ago, their schedule, largely because of regional bases, was weaker among the National Conference teams. You look at the teams they played last year: Derby City twice, Atlanta twice, Tampa Bay once, and Carolina once. Those teams, great teams, but not necessarily on that WFA Pro tier. Even with Tampa Bay, a team that still has its struggles on offense as well. So you figure they have the ability to. The question just becomes, if there's one major roadblock for them right now, it's Pittsburgh and then it's Boston. So we'll find out in a couple of weeks' time.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. In the second game of the opening weekend doubleheader at the Pro Division level, the Nevada Storm hosts the Mile High Blaze. Last season, both of these teams went 3-3 and missed the playoffs. They also met twice, with both teams winning at home. Alex, these teams have both found success and won national championships at the Division II level. However, moving up to the pro level, they have both found difficulties in maintaining that success. Who starts 2024 in the win column?
Well, like in our first game, Brian, the big thing with Nevada and Mile High last year was their depth and was their injuries, where both teams really suffered from injuries. Both teams had some difficulties because of lack of depth that they had at their position. We talked about a year ago how Nevada lost two major key pieces on offense in Jesse Felker and their running back, Jasmine Plummer. And they never really were able to find their footing until it was late in the season. At that point, with a competitive American Conference, it was too late. You look at how they started their season, 21 points in 2 games. That's not Nevada Storm football. That never really has been the key for the Nevada Storm, a team that we're used to when they made their jump consecutively from Division III to Division II and then again to WFA Pro. We're not used to seeing them struggle offensively. They found it late, a 48-point output at home to Wasatch, and then a 42-point output at home to Mile High. Again, there's reason to believe that there's optimism for the Nevada Storm, just because it's not a season that ownership group wants. It's not a season that Chris Garza wanted as their head coach, because just too many injuries at the start of the season really sunk the ship that was the Nevada Storm. But this year, you have one major question, and it comes back quarterback. We talked about Mo Etchen a number of times over the last handful of years here on Road to Canton. She no longer is on the roster for the Nevada Storm. Jesse Felker returns. The American Conference All-American MVP of that championship game back in 2022, she's back, and she's listed at the quarterback. We know what Jessie Felker can do because not only can she run the football, she can catch the football too. So she's got two sides to her game that can be really strong for Nevada. Now, if you add that receiving game in there as well, hey, that's a great option, certainly for Nevada to spread out their offense and make you have to plan around Jessie Felker because she can either run the football, she can do the Wildcat formation and just be able to keep it trusted. We think like the Minnesota Vixen teams of a couple of years ago, where they ran the ball and had those great quarterback options that worked so well and made a defense think, do I sell out to block the run? Do I go back to drop the pass? Well, you cover one, the other one's open. And so I think that opens up for Nevada a lot of great things that they can do on offense just because you have now a bona fide star. And we know she's a star in Jessie Felker to be able to lead that offense this year for Nevada. Their defense will be fine. But again, I think the big thing for them, you look at the high water mark in terms of points that they allowed twice to Cali and to Cali. 45 points and 50 points. They need to figure out how to make sure, because if we look out west, they have to still contend with the Cali War. They'll play a home-and-home series with them again. And so you have to look at how do we stop the Cali War. You need to be able to find that defense, especially with what the Cali War's game plan is. You have to be able to stop the pass, force them to run. And Nevada certainly has the ability, has a team on paper to be able to make that happen. But as we know, Brian, football games are won on the field and not on paper. Same, too, for the Mile High Blaze. There's a lot to look forward to there as well. Kimberly Santa-Steven returns as a quarterback for Mile High. She's been an All-American a number of years now. Phenomenal quarterback, great job of reading the field. And Leilani Kamal on the defensive side of the ball for Mile High gives you an option for the offensive superstar and the defensive superstar on both sides for Mile High. But again, my question for them, it's simple. It's health and it's depth. Where you look at their roster last year and their schedule last year, there were a number of results that I would consider for Mile High and their body of work at WFA Pro and WFA Division II that you look at and you say, that didn't seem quite right. And so looking at their results from a season ago, they started with 2 blowout wins over Nevada and over Sun City Stealth. But then you had a loss at Dallas, a loss at home to New Mexico. And you sit there and you wonder, well, what Mile High team do we have? Do we have the team that goes out and beats the top opposition in the WFA? Or do we have the team that drops the inexplicable loss at home? And so that's where I look at Mile High, and I have a lot of questions about how do they bounce back from a down season for the Blaze a season ago. On paper, again, like with Nevada, it's a team that's too good to have the season that they had last year. You look at their wins and losses, 3-3, no playoff bid. I'd say that's a disappointment for the Mile High Blaze. But again, part of that too, an American Conference that was competitive beyond all get out. Looking at these teams, because of the star power of Jessie Felker, my concern for her going into this game is how much rust is there, right? Not having played for the Nevada Storm for a year now, since her last game in 2022, and we saw what she did in 2022 when they played Minnesota all the time. The question becomes is how can she get back into the offense in game flow? Because practices are a lot different than games. If Jessie Felker can be able to move the ball effectively and be able to be the star that she was before, Jasmine Plummer's not there anymore, so now it's Jessie Felker's team. Now that she's back in Nevada Storm colors, can she be able to successfully work her way up and down the field? And of course, against Mile High, you got to watch out for Leilani Kamal and the defense of the Mile High Blaze. I give the edge here to the Nevada Storm.
Perfect. And now to throw something at you here, we talked about back in 21, the Nevada Storm wins the national championship at the Division II level. In 2022, the Mile High Blaze win the national championship at the Division II level. Last year in 2023, it was the New York Wolves. We've seen, you discussed it perfectly here, we've seen how the Division II champions, when they move to that pro division, aren't getting instant success, especially with the Storm, who we saw do phenomenal work at the Division III level, phenomenal work at the Division II level. Do the Wolves, to go back to that game that we talked about a little bit earlier, do the Wolves have what it takes to compete at the pro level, or do you think we're going to find them in the same rut that we've seen the Mile High Blaze and the Nevada Storm?
I think it's a curious question to ask because the New York Wolves they're a team with a chip on their shoulder. We talked about it during the Division II championship game last season. It's a New York Wolves team that has a massive chip on its shoulder and is intending to be able to prove the world wrong. Here's where I think New York needs to look at in terms of what they got going on. You look at their last 2 games that they played. You're losing at the half to the Baltimore Nighthawks. Then you make a change, and all of a sudden you're winning at the end of the game. Same 2 against OKC. You're only up by a touchdown at the end of the opening half against OKC and the Lady Force. Well, then all of a sudden you make a change and then you start dominating. And so the question that I have for the New York Wolves, they have the ability to, but again, you're not playing teams in a lower division anymore. You can't go out and play New York Knockout and win by 50 some odd points every time. That's not how it works at the WFA Pro Division level. If you want to make sure that the pundits know and that we can stop talking about you, well, now this is the opportunity, the time to go prove that the New York Wolves style of football will succeed at WFA Pro. I think that it can. But again, the question just becomes, does New York have enough to get over a Pittsburgh if Pittsburgh is healthy? A Alabama if Alabama figures out what's going on in their offense? And Boston if Boston, for whatever reason, and I have no reason to believe this, because again, until we see them and until we're proven otherwise, you have to believe they're the cream of the crop in the WFA. Do they have enough to contend against the Boston Renegades? That's a game of the week coming up for us here on the WFA. And so that is your mark where if you want to say, hey, Alex, Brian, look at us. We beat Boston. New York, that's your time to go do it. And so if you think you can, put your money where your mouth is. Let's go see what you got.
And we'll be right back. Welcome back. This season, we want you, the viewer, to have a more integral part on the Road to Canton Show. If you have video clips that you've recorded at a game, if you have somebody that you want us to interview, please let us know by dropping us a line at roadtocantonshow@gmail.com. We would be excited to share your take on the WFA with America. Don't forget, you can catch the thrills this season on multiple platforms. Don't miss a moment of the excitement. The games of the week will be broadcast live on Women's Sports Network, For the Fans, and more. Whether you prefer Roku, Fubo, Zumu, or Sling, you can tune in to witness the action on your favorite streaming platform. Join a global audience in celebrating women in sports and be a part of the conversation as these remarkable athletes showcase their greatness on the football field. It's going to be a great season across all divisions of the Women's Football Alliance, and we're excited to share with you stories, highlights, and more all season long. For Lois Cook and Alex Westhead, I'm Brian Sweeney, and we'll see you next time on the Road to Canton.
Thank you for watching the preceding presentation from the Women's Football Alliance.